Julian, thank you very much for joining us today. Obviously,
Pleasure, Michael.
you are attending AviaDev, the conference, and we've met a lot of great stakeholders who've shared their insights in the industry. What's the outlook? What needs to change? How should the policies shape up? How should people right-size their fleets as well to have more efficient airlines, efficient operations? Now, looking at Fastjet, you do have your Embraer fleets, and of course, that's a 50-passenger, and you're flying Harare to Bulawayo and Harare to Vic Falls as well. I know that there will be Joburg coming in the mix. When can we expect that to happen?
So Fastjet Zimbabwe started in 2015 with an Airbus A319. It started on the Harare-Joburg route and Harare-Vic Falls. And it was the wrong size of airplane at the time. It also, lacked, it was developing the brand, getting the recognition there. Zimbabwe had been burnt by a couple of low-cost carriers before, so there was a perception of, are these guys going to survive, etc., etc. We then right-sized the fleet back in around, it was before my time, so I'm going to say 2017, 2018, and we brought in the Embraer 145, originally on an ACMI type basis, and then we acquired 4 of the aircraft ourselves, and then we started developing the route network. So we were always flying Harare, Johannesburg, Harare, Victoria Falls, Harare, Bulawayo, and then since my time we've added Bulawayo, Johannesburg. We've added more frequency. We sort of seasonally did Johannesburg, Victoria Falls, but that was sort of playing at it. And we now are doing Johannesburg, Victoria Falls sort of up to 3, maybe sometimes 4 times a day. And we also pioneered a route between Kruger and Mpumalanga Airport and Victoria Falls. So we have sort of realistically 2 sort of effective hubs, for want of a better word. One being Harare, which is our main operational base, and the other being Victoria Falls, where we have services to Harare, services to Johannesburg, services to Kruger and Mpumalanga. And undoubtedly there's a potential there. I'd like to look at Victoria Falls, Bulawayo at some stage. Sort of complete that triangle, but not fly it as a triangle. And then there's sort of growth potential. It's challenging. Growth is not an easy thing for an airline of our size, particularly with the competitive matrix. And we've heard a lot about that this week. I mean, Roger Foster from Airlink came up with the interesting statistic that in India, 1.2 billion people, admittedly 1 civil aviation authority, but basically 10 airlines operating within India. Africa, 1.2 billion people, 53 civil aviation authorities, and 400 airlines. It's unsustainable on that basis. So rationalization needs to be done, but it needs to be done cleverly. So it doesn't mean to say we need to lose all 400 airlines, and that there is a place still for airlines of our size, but we need to be correctly aligned, and we need to be sort of clear on the value that we add. And the value that we add for Zimbabwe is we provide a very, very good domestic air service. We provide some great regional air services as well. But if through big airlines competing on our regional routes and squeezing us is not in Zimbabwe's interest, because if we weren't there, when Air Zimbabwe weren't there, who's going to fly domestically?
At any point in the future, are you going to be looking to expand this your network, your current route network, more into sub-Saharan Africa?
Yeah, I mean, we would like to, and that's why I'm here, basically. So I've had some stunning meetings this week, and I was at the first ever AviaDev in Kigali, wearing a different hat at that stage. So John and I have been working together for years, and I've always been delighted to come and support the event. I understand how the event works, and my job at this event is to meet airports and to talk to airports. Airports pay to be here, and so having airports spent a lot of time and quite a lot of money exhibiting here, it's only right and proper that for the wonderful hospitality that I receive to come, that I go and spend my afternoons with them and talk to them. And I've had some very good feedback, and I'm developing some very good relationships with airports that I'm not currently flying to. And I think we definitely will look at some new routes.
Talking about adding capacity, and you did mention wet leasing and ACMI that you had with your Embraers as well. Are you going to be considering any additional capacity to be adding into the fleet?
Fleet sizing is always a massive challenge, and we have real seasonal swings. So we can go almost from the sublime to the ridiculous. So getting the right aeroplane at the right time, and that becomes challenging because correctly, aviation is quite well regulated, particularly from a safety and oversight aspect. And so you can't just sort of turn around and say, well, tomorrow I'm going to, fly a 380 because I've got a big group here. But there are trends. So I think there very definitely is a model to have, and particularly I think this is where Africa actually can sort of develop better, is to have much more flexible fleeting. So work with sister airlines. So if you take ourselves, Eswatini, Air Botswana, ProFlight in Zambia, we're all very similar sizes, and Air Zimbabwe too. And we work well with Air Zimbabwe. We have a good relationship with them. But use our fleets so that we can create a win-win. So if a particular company is under pressure and we've got capacity, we can help them out at a sensible price. So we will still win. It'll still benefit us from helping them, and they will still win. And yes, we compete. We compete with lots of airlines. We still talk to those airlines and we still work with them because we all have a responsibility to fly a passenger from A to B, and we take that responsibility very seriously. And if on a particular day we have a technical challenge or what have you, I'm more than happy to buy seats with another airline, and they will benefit, and our customer benefits at the same time. So, coming back, since I've waffled a bit, and I apologize for that, but coming back to changing the fleet size, it's not a quick and easy thing to do. So to permanently change your fleet size is a very painful transition and generally a very expensive transition. To temporarily, by maybe using some short-term ACMI capacity, is a lot easier. And it's also a way of discovering whether you like the aeroplane that you've chosen to use on an ACMI. So it's a good sort of risk hedge to test the market. And we're constantly evaluating that, yes.
Looking at the industry as a whole, taking a bit of a broader look at it and developing it as well. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about SATAM and its implementation. There's also, the recent visas, which have been quite controversial in how they're being implemented in the industry. Lots of talk, lots of dialogue, very little collaboration. What action needs to be made, within the continent to get it right?
Yeah. So being an idealist, Europe obviously has its European Aviation Safety Agency, EASA, and there's deregulation. You can fly anywhere, so there's no such thing as cabotage obviously if you're a European carrier, there's no such thing as cabotage. There's no need for fifth freedoms, fourth freedoms, 85th freedoms, whatever you want to, term them. And we can all get bogged down in the jargon. But basically, you can have an Irish registered aeroplane leaving Malta in the morning, flying to Rome, continuing to the Czech Republic, and ending in Barcelona. It's been nowhere near Ireland. It may be flown by Maltese guys because they're all European licensed, and it's therefore it's relatively easier because it's one license, it's one and yes, there are still the individual aviation authorities, and they control the aviation. So if you've got a Maltese AOC, you'll go through and work with Transport Malta. And obviously, the UK is no longer part of that, but it's obviously still sort of there or thereabouts. But We don't have that in Africa. And so SATAM is fantastic. I fully support SATAM. I think it's absolutely terrific. But it's not viable with 53 different civil aviation authorities. So what really would be the best is, say, to look at it geographically. So have a North African Civil Aviation Authority, a West African Civil Aviation Authority, an East African Civil Aviation Authority, and a Southern African Aviation Authority, and have deregulation within those, because then instantly you've cut down the bureaucracy massively, by thousands of %. And that would then create the environment. And then your thing is then sort of, so your bilaterals are now between maybe one area of Africa to another area of Africa. And maybe in the end, you get to the point of having a unified Pan-African. But if you think about it, you've got the Arabic countries in the north, you've got the Francophone countries in the west, you've got the Swahili countries in the east, and you've got basically the English and Portuguese countries in the south. So, that could work. It won't happen in my lifetime, sadly. So what you have at the moment is it's a deregulation aspect that works geographically, or technically it works, but in practice it doesn't. So we come back to the scenario of the bilateral between Zimbabwe and South Africa. They wanted to go unlimited. We said, no, that doesn't work, because ourselves and Air Zimbabwe are at a very different development stage in our lives than the South African carriers who are on the route. With, South African Airways is a very different entity to Air Zimbabwe or ourselves. Airlink is, has grown significantly over the last few years, and 60 odd airplanes, and I can't remember how many routes. I mean, I think they employ someone full time to paint new routes on their route map in their office. And SAF Air's, lots of airplanes. They're starting to, get involved regionally. SEMAIR has grown exponentially. So we're dealing with companies that are much bigger than ourselves. And then also, not only them, so we then got Ethiopian, who are obviously the mega carrier of Africa. We've got Rwanda, who growing significantly. Kenya Airways. So there's some big players around, and we're a small little ERJ 145 operator with 50 seats each, and doing a decent job of flying Zimbabweans. And but you get to the point where your revenue streams become threatened because of competition. Now, in a pure competitive market, you say that's great, but I come back to my point. If we're not here tomorrow, who flies domestically in Zimbabwe? So is it in Zimbabwe's interests for a total open sky? Now, if you're the chief exec, who's a friend of mine, the chief executive of Airports Company of Zimbabwe, his job is to make as much money in his airports as successful as possible. So the more carriers that fly for him, the better. But then domestically, there's no flying. So how do you now get to Victoria Falls? Now, yes, Air Zimbabwe is there, but Air Zimbabwe currently is smaller than we are. So, and Air Zimbabwe will face the same problems. I mean, I spent a lot of time with Edmund McConnor this week discussing exactly this. And he's a SATAM ambassador. So he passionately believes in SATAM, but he also totally understands the pitfalls from a national airline perspective, or from the internal aspects. So unless Zimbabwe really is going to turn around and say, look, we'll just open up our skies and, anybody can fly domestically in Zimbabwe, which they can't do because their civil aviation authority will want safety oversight, and they need safety oversight. So you can't have a carrier from another country coming in and flying domestically in Zimbabwe. You can't have Zimbabwe's airspace being controlled by the Civil Aviation Authority of South Africa or the Civil Aviation Authority of Ethiopia.
Give us a short teaser and outlook into the development of Fastjet over the next 5 to 10 years.
Obviously, massive concentration on making profit and giving our shareholders who have been very good to us, a return on their investment. We need to develop, we need to grow, we need to be entrepreneurial. We need to, and I don't want to use sort of cliches of like sort of out of the box and, you know, that sort of stuff, but we need to think a bit differently. So I think the word is we need to be entrepreneurial. And we need, I mean, and I have a new role at Fastjet, which is basically strategy and development. And so, you know, it's thinking up of crazy ideas and then getting them shot down in flames, quite rightly, by our exco. But if you don't keep thinking up these crazy ideas, one of these days, one of those ideas will stick. And so growth can concentrate on doing what we do well, concentrate on developing our relationships with our partners in the industry, our stakeholders, our competitors, because we're all in it together in a funny way. We compete tooth and nail. But at the end of the day, we do have this combined responsibility of providing the infrastructure. And aviation is the best way to develop a country. You know, the old cliche, you know, a mile of runway, a mile of road will take you a mile. A mile of runway will take you to the world.
Yes.
And they cost pretty much the same to build. So, I mean, I lived in Tanzania for 12 years. And if you look at some of the remoter towns in Western Tanzania, the easiest and quickest way to get there is to put an air service. And actually, one of the things that Air Tanzania has done well is start opening up more airports, and that encourages investment, and then the road will come. The road will always come. But the easiest way of opening places up and getting things moving is definitely by air.